I just realized I went to the bathroom and I was mic'd up.
Special. So, where to begin? You're a writer, director,
A lot of emotions
producer,
after
yeah.
I say, yeah?
A lot of emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Writer, director, producer, studio executive, and production executive. But you didn't start off with that, wasn't your passion. Maybe talk a little bit about the sports background before we get into the
All
cinema.
right. I have no water.
I got it. I can do the water for you, okay?
Yeah, sports background, definitely. I used to play hockey. And through hockey, I actually got a scholarship to go to prep school in New York. So that was my introduction to the States, was to go to prep school in New York. And it was I went to Millbrook School, which is just a lovely school. And the funny thing is that I was there playing hockey, and they had an arts program, and they were doing a musical on what is it, the Princess and the Pea, the Once Upon a Mattress.
Once Upon a Mattress, right.
So they're doing Once Upon a Mattress, and I had a friend of mine who was singing and was part of that group. And at one point they were looking for the idiot prince or whatever role, and she said, "What about Dominic?"
Oh, typecast.
Yeah, what about Dominic? And everybody was laughing. Oh my God, yeah. And then so they asked me, and I went in, and I could sing well enough to do it, and so I got the part, and I ended up doing the musical at the school. And just it was a funny thing, because it's one of those sort of life-changing experience, because I don't think, had I not been part of that musical, I don't think I would have pursued a career in film.
Really?
It was just such a wonderful experience. I cried again watching the movie. I'm like, I've seen it 100 times. It's getting really annoying. And so, but yeah, so it was one of those life-changing experiences, because just this sort of feeling of working together with a bunch of people at creating something, and then experiencing the live crowd reaction as you're performing. Was something that I'll never forget, and I'm a big fan of musicals, and I love to go to see a Broadway show, and I just, that feeling, that you get from a live audience is just something unbelievable. And I don't think I had as much of a payoff playing hockey, that that I had when we did the musical. And what we say, it's always, it's the journey and it's the process, it's not the end result. And that was something that I realized at that time. I think the process of doing it, and the rehearsals, and working on the play was just so great, that I just found myself through that experience. And so I started getting more and more involved into the arts afterwards, and screenwriting and filmmaking. And then the year after, we did a movie, and it just kept building from there. So yeah, I think that's how it started.
And there is a kind of a translatability between being a member of a sports team and being part of a production, right?
That's very much so. And I think as a producer, because I wear a hat, because I wear a lot of hats in my and so the producer hat on. I think as a producer, it really, really helped me, because I was a director before, and so I was put in certain situations that were very difficult, on movies that, with a bad script, trying to make it work with the I don't want to say that they were poorly produced, but those weren't the best those weren't the best scenarios to work with. And so I think I learned a lot from that as a producer. And so when I moved into producing, I kind of felt a responsibility to sort of keep the team together and to be a leader for this team and to be sort of a father figure to protect them and to sort of guide them and so yeah, I think there's a lot. I take a lot from the sports background into producing in terms of leadership and what that means and what it means to sort of right, push the boat in the right direction and get the best out of everyone and just create an environment that is fun where people enjoy working. That's was one of the things with Mlle Bottine that people kept saying. It was just such a fun shoot. You were there, you came to see us, and Antoine, the lead, at one point said, that this was the best shooting experience of his career, and he's had a pretty impressive career. So I think I think it's very important to have that sort of environment where people feel like they feel safe. They feel like they could come in and create, and it's not. We're not under the gun, and it's not like, okay, we have to finish, we have to rush, we have to do this. It's not. Sadly, a lot of filmmaking experience ends up being like that because there's so much pressure and there's so little time, and so it's our job as producers to be able to create that environment that is creative, especially when you're working with young actors, because they can't feel the pressure. They shouldn't feel the pressure. It should be a playground. It should be something playful. It should be a chance to just have fun, and to explore just how far you could push it. But so yeah, there's a lot of things that I tie.
Yeah. Let's talk about Lafayette Films.
Yeah.
What's the history there, and how did you get involved with that? Because that's the production company that you have, right?
Well, Lafayette it's a 40-plus-year-old company because it was created in 1980 by Roch Demers, who was a very famous producer, very celebrated producer, and he read an article at one point about the rate of depression that in young adults and children, and that really sort of hit home, and he wanted to find a way to do something about that, and his solution was, let's just make inspiring movies. and so and so he started Lafayette, and he started what became the Tales for All. The movies were known as the Tales for All. So it was sort of a series of movies, and the first ones were so successful that it just grew and grew and grew, and I think it just revealed just how badly people around the world, and not just in Quebec, needed that type of movies. Um, these movies were kind of like reminders of that life is worth living, and that there's beauty in it, and sometimes you have to look hard to find it, but it's there somewhere. And so over the years, with what ended up happening is, animation came in and took a big part of the family market. We call it the four quadrant market. And then the superhero movies came in and took a big part of that. And then slowly the sort of live action classic family movie that we had grew up on and that we loved so much kind of died down, and we just stopped making them. And in today's business reality, they just didn't make sense anymore. It's too expensive to promote a movie and to get it out there. We've entered a reality that is a sort of go big or go home reality. And so unless you're doing this huge movie that is based on a big IP, it's just very hard to take the risk. So, but I felt in 2015, I bought the company, and I wanted to start my own company, and I wanted to get back to live action family entertainment, like the movies that we loved, from E.T. to to Home Alone to The Goonies, all of these movies that inspired us. I wanted to make those. That's what I wanted to be making, you know. And so I figured that by starting my own company, I could develop these type of movies. And you know, we used to refer it together as the live action Pixar.
Yeah, right.
And I think that they're necessary. I think that we have a responsibility as producers and as storytellers to put something on the big screen that can have a positive impact. Because I think sometimes we take for granted or we underestimate the power of filmmaking. You know, like you have people in a room watching a big screen, going through all sorts of emotions, whether they're good or bad. You know, you're experiencing them, and so these emotions are have become part of your creation. You know, and so I think it's very important that we have movies like this that shed light, you know, that make us feel hopeful.
Well, that idea that you had of making live action Pixar movies, because they do play into the emotion. I mean, they lean into that. And this movie
Yeah.
definitely has a swirl of emotion up and down, right?
Yes, very much so. That's your fault.
Well, maybe we could talk a little bit about that because we intersected on this project, right?
Yeah.
It was about this project. And
Yes.
so maybe talk a little bit about that.
Well, what happened is that I took over the company and we spent about, I think it was probably 4 years of development hell. Like we were trying really hard to get it going, and we had a couple of projects that we had identified that you know we believed in, and we tried getting the scripts together, and they could never quite reach the level that we wanted, and there's a tone aspect. There's a certain, you know, what's the word, tonality. There's a what is it?
Tonality, yeah.
Tonality
Yeah,
that we were looking for that we couldn't quite find, and it's very hard to find that balance because they have to be funny, you know, and they have to be sort of fast paced also, and so it's just hard to find the right balance. Is to say, okay, so this is, and there are different levels of storytelling because you are talking to a young audience, but you're also talking to adults, and you know, which Pixar has done so well. So we couldn't quite figure it out. We couldn't quite put it together, and at one point we had this one movie that was supposed to go, and everybody was waiting for a shooting script, and when the script came in, I knew that it wasn't there. And that becomes a very difficult decision because you're thinking, well, we have to shoot, we have to make money, you know. We
got to generate revenue.
Yeah, we have to generate revenue. This company has to survive, you know. But at the same time, you know that the first time you're gonna come out with a movie, it has to have the signature on it. You have to be able to say, okay, so that's what we're gonna be known for. That's the type of movies we want to make. And so we were kind of lost. And at one point, we had a sports background again playing into it. I was very much used, and I used to be a goaltender in hockey, so I was very much used to the coach athlete relationship, and I value it and I love it, and I think that we should have more of it in filmmaking. You know, I don't understand that we don't, you know, value that and ask for that, you know, as storytellers to find a coach and to find a mentor.
Like a mentor, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Like in sports, you have it all the time, but as a screenwriter, you feel like you have to lock yourself in a room for months and hope that you know you're gonna find your way up there, and it just doesn't work that way. So what ended up happening is we were looking for someone that could coach me, because my wife came in one morning after the other movie fell apart, and and she said, "Why don't you write the first one? You know, like by now we know what we're trying to do, and you know what you have in mind, and so why don't you just do it? You know?" And I was like, "Okay, so fine, but I'm gonna need to find a coach." And then we found Scott Myers. And I was I had followed your blog and some of the stuff that you were writing, and so we reached. I think it was my dad who reached out to you
That's
first,
right.
and then I don't know what conversation you guys had, but then he called me back and he said, "Yeah, I reached out to Scott Myers," and I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," and he asked me one question which I didn't know how to answer, and I was like, "So what was that?" And he says, "Yeah," he says, "Is Dominic coachable?" and and he's like, "I don't know. Are you coachable?" And I said, "Damn right. If I have the right coach and we're going in the same direction, yeah." And so we got to talking, and I think I remember like within 30 seconds we had just
Yeah.
really clicked. And it was just something that that just made it work on a human level. And then you read, I think, a treatment for this.
And then watch the original version of it
Right.
from 1984.
84. Right, because that movie is inspired by a movie from 1984 that our company had produced. I say inspired because it's a completely new story,
Completely different.
but the basic idea of the story is inspired from that movie. So you watched that movie and then you read the treatment,
Yeah.
and then you called me back and you said that you
Let's
loved
work
it
on
and
this.
you wanted us to work together.
And for those, of course, my screenwriting students would know my obsession with character, but that's what we spent so much time on this project was just,
Right.
and I kept saying, let's go deeper, right?
Yes, let's go deeper, and that's a long journey. But the funny thing is, I remember what was great about it was two things. The first thing is it was just not possible, and there was no way we were going to work together because you were very busy and you were teaching and you were also on tour, giving conferences and I was running a business and trying to do all of this stuff, and then the pandemic hit,
Yeah.
and just exactly at that moment, and everything stopped. So your entire schedule freed up
Right.
from and then and I was forced to be in my office at home for months because we couldn't get out, and we both got on a call and we were like, well. Here we go.
It was like
Let's
weekly, right?
begin.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't think, I mean, to this day, I keep saying all the time that I'm not grateful for the pandemic in a sense that it was a terrible time, but I'm grateful for that opportunity that to have just time stop for a year. Because I don't think if that had not happened, I don't think this would have happened.
Yeah, because you have to, as a screenwriter, you have to immerse yourself in the story world. You've
Right.
got to get to know the characters, and you can see the depth here. This is not one of those sort of surface level bad family films that you would have seen maybe back in
Yeah.
the '80s. These things they kind of rushed out. I mean, it's actually quite cinematic too. I mean, it has a very wonderful visual aesthetic to it. So maybe you could talk a bit about the process of like casting and all that sort of thing once you had the script pretty much whipped into shape.
Well, the one thing I want to talk about, because you asked me before and I didn't fully answer, is about character development. I think for me the main thing, what was great about it when we started working together was the fact that you were writing your book. So I was getting pages from your book that was still unpublished as we were working together.
Right.
So I could read through the approach that you were putting together and the technique that you've developed, and then we would put that into practice together
Yep.
with this story. And a lot of it had to do with the belief that characters exist. Like they're alive, they're there, they're somewhere in the field of creation. And there's a big leap that has to happen as a screenwriter between you writing the story from your perspective and to you serving the story and serving these characters. And that's what I learned working with you, especially when we started working on this, because it's, the fact that it's not about you as a writer, you're there to serve these characters. And so you have to spend a lot of time trying to understand them, to get to know them, to give them a chance to come to life. And I remember what we used to do is I write in the morning, so I get up at 4:30 and I write from 5 to 7:30 every morning, and I would do these sort of free writing sessions, right? Where I would be like a psychologist sitting down with the character, and I would just ask them questions for the whole session. I had sessions with them. and I remember I was doing sessions with Simone, and I would ask her questions, and I would write, and then at the end of the day, I'd feel pretty stupid, and I'd be like, oh yeah, that was a waste of time. And I could see that I was sort of forcing the answers, but you pushed me to, just keep at it. And then I asked her about that tomorrow, and let's see what she says. And I played along, and I was like, okay, fine. I'm coachable, so I'll do it. And after 2 weeks, I think, there was this one morning when the night before you tricked me and you said, why don't you ask her about, what happened when she found out that her parents had died. And I realized that I had no idea what had happened in the backstory. And so the next morning I asked her, and by then it was week 2 and I was already sort of in the flow, when I would start writing, and I asked her about it, and then she started telling me what happened, and she explained that she was in the barn when she heard the car come up the driveway, and she could know that something was wrong because the sound of the wheels in the gravel was different than her parents' car. And then she looked up, and it was a police car, and she felt that something had gone wrong, and her parents had gone out for dinner. And so she sits back in the barn with the animals, and she doesn't want to come out of the barn because she said, I knew that the second I would walk out of that barn, my life would change forever. Right. And so she was holding on to the past and to the reality from before by just staying locked inside the barn for as long as she could. And I remember when I was writing it and I was hearing it, I was very emotional. It was very, I was crying, and then I finished the morning. I was like, wow, what happened? It was just great. And then we had this Google Doc that you would read in the afternoon, and so that night I got a message that said we have to talk, and then we got on a Zoom call that night, and you had highlighted the lines or the things that she had said, which sounded different than anything that she had said before that I had written for the first 2 weeks. Yeah. And you showed me the difference, and we looked at it together, and she didn't speak the same way. She, the speech pattern had changed. The way she spoke, the way I wrote her was different. And then you said she came to life. Yeah. That was the morning that it happened. And I could see it, on paper. So that was a big lesson. That's the moment when I realized, okay, there is a moment that these characters actually take life, and you're not just yourself trying to say, oh, I think she'll say this.
It's an epiphany, isn't it? I mean, it's a big realization when all of a sudden you start to hear them and they start to do things, surprise you.
Right.
Yeah.
That's crazy. But that's writing.
That's writing.
But unless you've pushed yourself hard enough, or you've been pushed by someone else, it's not gonna happen, and so why I read a lot of scripts, or we have a lot of projects where I could see that the writers haven't gotten there yet, so I can hear their voice through all characters in the script,
So you've now got your own version of what we've talked about.
Yeah.
And you wrote a very successful film called Coco Ferm. right? On your own. That was your first film that came out, and that's done very, very well, right? Yeah. And then this one, and you have others. And so maybe you could talk a bit about this idea, which I always thought was very interesting, that you would, because we all know Hollywood is so obsessed with pre-existing IP.
Yeah.
Do a French language version and then go to Hollywood and say, look, this was a successful movie. Now
Yeah.
let's do the English language version. So maybe unpack that a little bit, what that business model is.
Yeah, because well, you said it perfectly. We live in times where it's very, very difficult to finance a movie, and it's costing a lot of money to distribute it. And then we know the whole reality, and the scene is changing. Also, you got a movie with Brad Pitt and George Clooney that's not being released in theater. Like that would have never happened. And so the whole industry is changing. And obviously it's gotten very hard to make a lot of these great movies that we did before. I'm a big fan of Nancy Meyers. I love her work. I think she's just a wonderful writer and director. And now her daughter just did her second movie, Goodrich, which is coming out I think next week. And the point is, like I read a post that she wrote, and she said that those are the type of movies that they don't make anymore, and I was so glad that they made this one. And she's right, like a lot of her movies, which are, timeless and beloved in today's reality, would never get made. And that's a problem. And so what I thought of is to say, well, how about we do it in Quebec on the French market first, and then once they're very successful there, then there is a proof of concept, so we could come in and say, okay, so this thing just killed at the box office, it became a major hit, and so now they're paying attention. There's going to be, okay, so there's a proof of concept. There's a track record. Right. It's not as big of a risk because it's done really well around the world, and it's done well on a specific market. So it makes it easier to get interest into making these films on a bigger budget.
Well, I think it's great that you have that idea, and I think it is a very solid concept. I want to talk about this movie, which we just saw a little bit more. First of all, the lead two characters are both wonderful. Maybe you could talk about the casting process there.
Well, Antoine is a big star. He's probably the biggest movie star we got up north. So we got him very early. But Philip is a very strange and difficult character to play. And Antoine in real life is like, he's nothing like Philip. I mean, he's outgoing, he's outspoken, he's loud, he's funny, he's got zero social anxiety. He's the least anxious person I've met. So that was hard for him because he was very excited about the script. Everybody, and as a testament to what we talked about earlier, the big comment that kept coming back to the script was how these characters felt real on the page. So actors love that, because you could feel that character, So it helped him a lot to play Philip. That with all the little things that were in the script, and then the dialogue and in the way he spoke, and so he came in and early. That was great. Margaret was another story because casting kids and animals, right?
You took on two
kids
of them.
and animals. Don't do it. They say don't do it. But Margaret, it's always, the thing is that there's something that we learn from a great French-Canadian director called André Melançon, who had done some of the early Tales for All. And he came from the documentary world, and he had worked a lot with children. And his vision was, or his philosophy was, that you don't cast a child actor. you find the kid that is the role. And that's the way we approach it. And so we were trying to find Simone. You know, we were not trying to find a great kid actress, because we had a few, and in the end we had three. Two of them had more experience. They were great actors, and they could have done a great job. And it was on a production level, it was more of a secure decision to work with them. And the distributor was saying, "Oh yeah, she's great. Let's do it." But she had a spark, she had something, though she was a big risk, because we didn't know if she was gonna freeze in front of the camera once she got on the set, but we knew that she had that character in her. She was Simone, like that voice, that sort of spirit, that's the way Marguerite is.
Yeah, and she won Best Actor.
She won Best Actor in Germany 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Well, I was on set. It was so much fun. Where they were staging it was this abandoned bank, and as I'm talking to somebody, and all of a sudden she comes up and she's, "Juste un petit with the French, right?" And of course I don't understand anything, but the director's daughter is hanging out with her and interpreting, and she says she wants to take you on a ghost tour. And so she's leading me around this bank. We're going up and down
the ghost tour.
"Don't look over there, your head will fall off." She just came up. She was such a live wire.
Yeah. I was very glad you came in, because you acted as a babysitter for that day, which was great. I was like, "Where's Scott?" He's with Margaret. He's doing the ghost tour.
What about the music? I was so impressed with that. How did that? I mean, the compositions.
Yeah, we had two. We had Ram, who composed the music for the film, but we also had another composer just for the opera score, who had more experience with the opera. I think Ram could have done it, but he wasn't available, and we had to score the opera before we started production because of the playbacks. So every time you hear an opera score in the movie, it was already recorded before with the orchestra and everything. So we had to work on. I wrote the opera for Le Portrait de Rose, which is in the movie. So I had to write an entire storyline for that opera, so that we knew what it was and it wasn't random. So I spent about 2 weeks writing an opera that we're never going to see. But then he took that and then he wrote the music for it, and we knew that we had about 3 major pieces that needed to be in the movie. That Philip writes and that Alice works with him.
I know at some point there were several thematic things that you were playing around with in our discussions, but that second chance was a big epiphany. And was that part of the music as well, or did you have that in mind when you were doing the opera, or did that come later?
That came later. No, we had it when we did the music, but it came very late in the process.
Sort of like the movie itself.
Sort of like the movie itself. Life imitates fiction. And it's funny because I looked at it again, but it was the first time when I looked at it tonight that I realized just how close to me the story is. Right about what you know. I don't think I've really noticed that before tonight, like how his sort of journey of hearing the music and finding inspiration and figuring things out is very similar to the one I experienced writing the movie. And so a parallel is that, like sometimes, we know the theme, we know what we're going for, we know the moral premise that we're playing with, So we're always trying to figure out what's the false belief of this character, and what's the moral premise at the core of the story. And so we know that his belief is that he is more safe if he's recluse and if he's isolated from the outside world, because the outside world is cruel. And people are mean, and so he's been hurt before, and so his reaction to that is to close himself up. I really like that concept that as we grow older and as we become adults, we lose a bit of that innocence. You know, that loss of innocence is always a great theme to play on, especially on in family entertainment. But you know, we do lose something. You know, and I like the idea that, you know, because you've had your heart broken, because you've had these failures, because you've been killed by the critics, you're gonna slowly build a prison around yourself, you know, and lock yourself in, and you develop these defense mechanism, you know, or these ways to cope with this and not be affected by it, but you are. And it's very hard to create when you're in that position, you know, because you're always sort of, you lose access to the true inner self and that child within that is the spark, the creative spark that you need to have. And then you bring in a character like her, which is like his inner child coming out of him and knocking on the door and to say, I'm going to take you on a journey because this cannot work any longer. But we got all that, and we know that's the story, and we know what we're trying to say. And so once that's figured out, you know, Chris is my wife, and we work together on everything. And so Chris and I are like really going at every scene and every angle to say, okay, so how are we reflecting one side or the other of that moral premise? You know, so every other character represents one side or the other, and they're confronting the protagonist. You know, in this, and obviously we're going through the steps that you teach and that you've developed. But all that to say that you might do that, and then you get to the end of the movie, but I still hadn't figured out what that line was going to be. And I was very mad about it because Pixar always has it, you know. They always have the big reveal. You know, there's always this moment where there's this one line and you go, "Oh, that's what the movie's about." Okay. Right. How did I not see it? And there was a version of the script where it was great. Everything was great. The movie was terrific, and it ended, and it was great, and we were all very excited. But I wasn't happy with it because there was still something missing, just like him in the story. You know, there's this one thing, and Chris was like, "Yeah, but what are you talking about?" Just like, I don't have that line. You know, I don't have that moment where people are going to go, oh, that's what it's about. And very, very late, it finally revealed itself at one morning when I was reworking the same scene that was already finished. And then at one point, he just came out and he said, you know, I finally get it. It's you. You're my second chance.
That's right. That's great. We're going to take some questions here. And so if you want to line up over, I think it's over there, if you have some questions for Dominic. Real quick, you're developing a slate of projects, and so I'm assuming at some point you're going to be wanting to. I mean, you're an executive as well. You can't be writing all the time, so you're going to have to be reaching out and finding other writers. And
I'm very much trying not to write anymore.
It's hard.
It's hard, but that's the goal. Yes.
To oversee.
Well, it's very difficult to run a company, to produce movies, and to be a writer, because you know to write you have to write, and you have to be sort of in that strange space, headspace, and my wife doesn't really like it when I write either, because I don't exist anymore and I forget things, and it's like, did you pick up our daughter? I was like, what? And so yeah, it's a lot of, but I've managed to figure out a way, because I write in the morning, and so I've time block. You know, I read this great book, The One Thing, and it just helped me a lot sort of structure my day. And now I've gotten to a point where it's like the subconscious mind knows that at 5 a.m. is the writing session. Yeah. And so my conscious brain is not awake yet. And for me, that allows me to be a better writer at that moment. Because when the kids get up and life starts and the day starts, I'm not touching a script because I just mess it up all the time.
Well, it sounds to me like, you need young screenwriting students
Yes.
from maybe a Midwest school, film school or something?
I think I do. I think I do. I think I do. And my goal is to be able to develop, talent and to have a pool of writers that
Just like Pixar does.
Yeah, exactly. That we
Right.
could work together and create this sort of little creative hub, and this little community where this safe space where they could come in and help tell these stories.
As they say in Hollywood, from your lips to God's ears, right?
That's right.
So we got some questions over here. Dewey, please identify yourself, your name, and then whatever your question. Here you go.
Yeah, my name is Van Wilson, and thank
Hello,
you.
Van.
Hello. Thank you for sharing this beautiful story with us, this wonderful film. You mentioned it that never work with children and animals. And I'm just wondering, as a producer, I teach it myself, the reason not to work with children and animals because they'll work until they won't. And, they get tired.
Yeah.
So as a producer, how do you schedule for that? And allow the time to get the shot, but also to prep everyone to be like, hey, we need to, get it within the first few shots or whatever.
There's no one great answer. I think as much as I can, I try not to give them sort of time limits. But we'll build a schedule accordingly. Like, I'm not gonna get into production if I know that we would have to do certain scenes in a day because we don't have to, I'm just not gonna do it. So we try and have the kids in on specific shots. So there's a lot of prep that goes into it with the director so that we storyboard or we plan accordingly so that we know that, if we have 6 shots out of 20 where she's in, and the animals are in, then we're going to start with that, and we're going to get rid of the animals, and we're going to start chipping away at elements that are making it difficult. So that, so if we could get rid of the close-ups and the animals, then that's done. And then finally we spend time with her so that we have a lot of time with her. And then we finished with without her, because there's also the issue of they're not allowed to shoot that past I can't remember what it is, but you can only have them shoot for X amount of hours in a day. So it's just a lot of planning, but we don't want the kids to know that, but we know that we have them for X amount of time, and we try and start with the bigger problem. The biggest challenge you're trying to get rid of the first. So all of the shots with animals are done.
Get them out.
Get them out. I don't want them on set anymore. And also financially, it's just very expensive. Like just to keep the skunk on set was expensive. So the faster we could get the animal out. And we had a fake skunk that we would, so that when she wasn't on camera, Margaret had the fake skunk with her. So yeah, so you find these little tricks to manage, but don't create a situation that could become a problem by putting too much stress on kids and on animals, because it's not gonna work. Yeah.
Good
Okay,
advice.
thanks for that question.
Thank you.
We have another question here for Dominic. Yeah, name and your question, please.
Yeah, hi. My name is Anders. My question is kind of more about the story and like the themes of the movie. Something I really liked about this movie that I think is present in a lot of the best family movies is like that balance of the kid-friendly element of it, but also the like really serious discussion of adult emotions.
Right.
And so I'm wondering, kind of when you were writing it, when you were developing it, where did you draw the line? What was your philosophy on like including those more, he suffers from social anxiety. So how did you decide when to pull back or when to like double down on that kind of emotional depth?
What's your name?
Anders.
Anders.
Yeah.
It's a very good question. The answer is you don't. We don't pull back. Mm. We just go all out, and we don't think in terms of family entertainment at all. We just think in terms of character, and you know, what's the story of this person, and how can I tell it, and we're trying to address topics that might be difficult, or that you know, maybe a younger audience will not understand, and that's fine. And so it's much easier to tone it down afterwards, you know, in the way you approach it. But I think one of the big mistakes that I've seen done in family entertainment is to think in terms of, to try and think that your audience is young, so they're naive, and you have to talk to them, you know, at kids level. You know, I think kids are a lot smarter than we give them credit for. And even though they're not going to understand certain things, they understand the emotion. And so we don't shy away from addressing, you know, important topics or themes, but we find a way to make it accessible, you know. And so yeah, I think that's, does that answer?
It does, yeah. I think it shows a lot of respect to, you know, the child audience. So
Well, there's this, you know, I was in Germany and I saw a lot of family entertainment that was there, and I was part of a talk which was about this topic, and one of the things that I didn't like is I hated it when I was young, and I hate it still today. I dislike movies that are done by people who think they know what it's like to be a kid. You know, oh, they're gonna think that's funny. You know,
right, yeah.
Oh, what about, how about we just do this? You know, yeah, they're kids. You know, or you sort of you know, shortcut it and you kind of go, oh, it doesn't matter, they're kids. You know, like, I don't like to think that way. I just want to do the best movie possible, and we do it in a way that it's going to speak at different different levels to different age groups. So if a 9-year-old doesn't get something, that's fine. You know, he gets something else, and the adult gets it. But there's also the reality that I think adults like to feel like they're 11 again. And Philip is a great example in that movie because he suffers from social anxiety, severe social anxiety. We managed to make it funny in a sense that it's accessible, but every kid that looks at him knows what he's going through, because his anxiety as an adult is very much a feeling that you get as a kid, you know, going to school and facing the adult world, and being yelled at by by an adult who tells you that you can't play anymore. You know, so these are all things that they understand, and the movie is supposed to sort of give them tools to navigate through life, you know, as they're seeing these characters do so. So yeah.
I think your affection for Pixar, I mean, if you've seen Inside Out 2,
Right.
$1.5 billion worth of business, and the whole point of it is dealing with anxiety.
Exactly.
You know.
And not shying away with it, but they make it accessible.
Yeah.
So they make it funny, and they make it, but then they make it real, and then they
In
allow
some
you
ways,
to
it's
think.
helpful for you, I think, because they've had such success dealing with very serious
Right.
subject matter that then you say, okay, let's translate that into the live action arena, and we
Yes.
can traffic the same, go in the same.
Yeah, and for some reason that hadn't really been done that much lately. You know, it's like
Live
if you saw a family movie in live action, it was usually like, yeah, okay, it's a kids movie. You know, but yeah, Pixar has proven that you could do both.
Cool.
Okay, we have
Thank you so
another,
much.
another question for Dominic. Yes, here we go. And your name and the question, please.
Hi, my name is Ben, and I was just kind of wondering. So I've been studying French for a few years, and I'm wondering. I love to work in a French-speaking setting one day, and I'm wondering, like, how does that differ in a film sense, especially in screenwriting, to an English setting that we're used to here?
I'm not sure I understand. What do you mean?
So, like, in the screenwriting
Because I'm
process,
French, so I don't understand.
um,
That's how. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
So I was wondering, like, how in the screenwriting process and production process would, specifically the screenwriting process, does it differ, like, from an English setting where, I guess, like,
You mean culturally?
culturally and, like, yeah, culturally.
Yeah, it doesn't. I don't see a difference. Um,
We worked in English, and then you would translate it to.
Yeah, actually, I because I studied I did my prep school in New York and I studied in the States. I used to only write in English. I was a very poor French writer, and it was an issue. Like everybody was like, no, you can't write. Just don't. And I kept at it, and now I'm much better, so I can write in French now. But my sort of creative mind thinks in English for some reason. And so I don't think whether I write it in French or in English, it makes a difference at all. What does make a difference is on a culture level, but at the same time, like Roch Demers used to say, the human is the same everywhere. So when you talk about emotions, we could all, like we just watched a French movie tonight, and I could see people like going like, and laughing. Emotions are universal, themes are universal. So I think if you focus on theme, emotions, humor, what connects us, that there are no language barriers related to that type of story.
Thank you. That's the power of cinema too, right? We had another question for Dominic. Okay, your name, please.
Hi, I'm Liv. So earlier you mentioned that it was important for you to create a fun environment on set, especially since there were kids involved. And so my question is, as a producer, what are things you did on set for it to be like stress-free and more fun?
Oh, what's your name?
Olivia? Liv?
Olivia. That's a good question. The first thing, for me, it's kind of like being parents. Like your kids don't need to know that you don't know how you're going to pay the bills that month. They don't need to know that there's a problem. They don't need to know. It's like I don't allow people on set to talk about things that are not creative. So it'll just be, if you're on set, you're there to play and create and have fun, So all the rest of the conversations are happening in a different area that is close to the set. So that's one of the things that we do. And everybody is very much aware from the moment I hired them that it's not about them. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's not about the individual. It's about the movie, and what serves the movie is for us to have a fun set and everybody to have fun. And so you have to be, and now I'm talking to future producers. Like I've directed movies where the producer would show up once a week on set, and you can't have that and have a great set. You have to be there. You have to be the first in, last out. So because the problems in a production, the problems that you have were actually created a week before. So if you weren't there to stop it a week before, it's too late now when you come in. So it's very much presence. Being there and making sure that it's fun and that everybody is having fun. And if someone is not having fun, then there's a reason why they're not having fun. You need to know what that is and fix it. So it's sort of micromanagement to keep a good spirit and to create things that are going to be fun and have these dinners and have these lunch where everybody's and food, obviously food. You have to have good food on set.
This means illegal procedure in football.
There's a legal bit. Yeah.
Does it mean are we wrapping
No,
up?
that's basketball.
I saw one last question, or no?
I think that is our last.
That's our last
That
question.
was our last question.
Okay. Well, I have to say on the set where Dominic, that was the most fun, lighthearted, happy set I've ever been on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But it builds, like after a couple of days, like everybody starts getting the hang of it and they're enjoying themselves, and it shows on screen. It shows that everybody is sort of enjoying
All right.
it.
Let's have a round of applause here for Dominic James. Thank you.